The millionaire CEO told his secretary to leave, then panicked when she actually walked away. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The boardroom is silent in that expensive way silence only exists on the top floor of a glass tower overlooking Manhattan, the kind of silence that costs thousands of dollars per square foot and smells faintly of polished wood and fresh coffee. Ethan Walker stands at the head of the table, jacket still on, tie slightly loosened, eyes fixed on the financial projections glowing on the wall. Walker Dynamics is bleeding 3% quarter over quarter, not enough to make headlines, but enough to make board members nervous, and nervous people ask dangerous questions. Claire Bennett stands 2 steps behind him, tablet in hand, posture straight, voice calm, the kind of calm earned by years of catching mistakes before they explode. She leans in just enough and murmurs that the third column is using last month's supplier rate, not the renegotiated contract from last Friday. And if the slide goes out like this, it undercuts the cost-saving narrative Ethan plans to sell in exactly 9 minutes. Ethan exhales, nods once, and signals for the slide to be corrected. It is a small save, invisible to everyone else, but it keeps a 7-figure argument from happening, and Claire knows it, and Ethan knows it too, though he does not say thank you. The meeting grinds on, questions sharpen, voices rise, and when the final vote adjourns, the tension lingers like static. Outside the boardroom, assistants scatter, elevators ding, and the city hums 30 floors below. Ethan turns, frustration cracking through his composure, and looks directly at Claire, not at the work she saved, not at the long hours she keeps, but at the pressure he feels and does not want to carry alone. His voice is measured, clipped, practiced. If you cannot handle this pressure, you are free to leave. The words hang between them, polished and cruel, a sentence he has used before. A line meant to reassert control, a test disguised as professionalism. Claire does not flinch. She does not argue. She does not remind him of the nights she stayed past midnight or the weekends she canceled. She simply meets his eyes, nods once, and says, "All right. I will clear my desk." The hallway seems to tilt. Ethan expects a pause, a plea, a recalibration. Instead, Claire turns and walks away, heels steady, pace unhurried, as if she had rehearsed this exit in her mind long before he ever spoke the words. The door to her office closes softly, and the click sounds louder than the boardroom ever did. Inside that quiet room, Claire opens the small drawer she has always kept organized, the one that fits her life here in neat lines. A framed photo of her father from a summer on the Jersey Shore, a leather notebook with handwritten checklists, a pen Ethan once borrowed and never returned, now returned to its place. She moves efficiently, not because she is cold, but because she respects herself. She had given this job 3 years of her life, and it gave her skills, not ownership. She slides the box under her arm, powers down the computer, and leaves her badge on the desk, face up, no drama, no note. In the hallway, Ethan stands frozen, staring at the closed door, waiting for the moment when the test resolves in his favor. It does not. Minutes pass. The elevator chimes. Somewhere, a phone rings. A knot tightens in his chest, unfamiliar and unwelcome. He tells himself this is fine, that people are replaceable, that authority works because people need it to. Yet when he asks for the calendar, no one answers. When he reaches for the contact list, the passwords are missing. The foundation he never noticed begins to show. And in that quiet realization, before panic has a name, before regret learns to speak, let's return to the main character. The next morning, Ethan Walker arrives earlier than usual, the city still half asleep, streets washed clean by a late rain, the lobby quiet except for the soft whir of the security turnstile. He expects routine to steady him, expects the building to remind him who he is. But the moment he steps onto the executive floor, something feels off. The lights are on, yet the air lacks its usual order. His assistant desk is empty, immaculate in a way that signals absence rather than readiness. He reaches for his phone to check the schedule and realizes the day is a blur of red blocks without context. Claire used to translate chaos into clarity, not loudly, not dramatically, but consistently, and now the silence presses in. He tries to log into the operations dashboard and hits a wall of authentication prompts he never memorized because he never had to. He tells himself this is a temporary inconvenience, that replacements are easy, that authority fills gaps. It does not. By 10 o'clock, 3 emails go unanswered, a vendor waits on hold for 12 minutes, and a board member texts a question Ethan cannot answer without a file that lived in Claire's head. He calls information technology and listens to hold music, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the skyline. Somewhere between the chorus repeating and the minutes ticking, an unfamiliar feeling creeps in, not anger, not fear, but something closer to exposure. Across town, Claire Bennett walks into a small coffee shop near Bryant Park, orders a black coffee, and sits by the window with the box on her lap. She breathes out slowly, not in relief, but in resolve. Walking away did not feel dramatic. It felt necessary. She opens her notebook and writes a short list, not of regrets, but of next steps. Update resume. Call the recruiter who reached out last month. Text her sister. She does not replay the moment in the hallway. She does not craft speeches she never gave. She simply allows the quiet to exist. Her phone buzzes with a message from a former colleague congratulating her on the courage it must have taken, and Claire smiles once, then pockets the phone. Back at Walker Dynamics, the day unravels in small humiliations. Ethan mispronounces a client name Claire always corrected gently. He double books a call and has to apologize, the word tasting strange in his mouth. At lunch, Vanessa Cole stops by his office, perched confidence and perfume, and laughs lightly as she says everyone needs a reminder of their place now and then. She assures him Claire will come back by the end of the week, because people always do when they realize what they lose. Ethan nods, but the assurance does not land. He remembers the way Claire said all right, the way she did not bargain, and something in his chest tightens. He opens the drawer where her spare notepad used to be and finds it empty. The afternoon drags. At 4:30, he asks Human Resources for a short list of candidates and stares at the resumes, impressive on paper, hollow in comparison. By the time the sun dips and the city glows, he realizes he has not eaten. He stands by the window, watching traffic crawl like a living thing, and understands with a clarity that stings that the sentence he threw so easily was not a test of her loyalty. It was a test of his own assumptions. He believed proximity meant dependence. He believed silence meant consent. He believed power could not be refused. Across the park, Claire finishes her coffee and closes the notebook. She looks up at the sky, the light fading, and feels something steady settle in her chest. Whatever comes next will be chosen, not endured. And in a glass tower across town, a millionaire CEO finally admits to himself that the moment she walked away was the moment he began to lose control, not of his company, but of the story he told himself about who he was. By midweek, the absence becomes measurable, not in headlines or stock tickers, but in the small fractures that spread through Ethan Walker's days. Meetings start 2 minutes late because no one knows which version of the agenda he prefers. A compliance document circulates without the quiet annotation that once prevented a legal footnote from turning into a 6-figure problem. Ethan catches himself glancing toward the doorway at precise moments, expecting Claire to appear with that look that said she had already solved it. She does not. He works longer, sleeps less, drinks more coffee than he should, and the mirror in his office reflects a man who looks accomplished and strangely unmoored. On Thursday afternoon, Human Resources sends over 3 candidates. Impressive degrees. Clean references. Ethan interviews them back to back and realizes halfway through the second conversation that he is listening for someone else's cadence, someone else's way of distilling noise into sense. When the last candidate leaves, he rubs his temples and finally says out loud what he has avoided admitting. She was not an accessory. She was an axis. Across town, Claire Bennett sits in a bright conference room with exposed brick and a whiteboard crowded with ideas. The startup is small, funded by a cautious angel investor, but the energy is honest. They ask her how she would streamline operations without burning people out. Claire answers without bravado, explaining systems, not control, trust, not fear. She feels her shoulders loosen as she speaks. Afterward, the founder walks her to the door and says they will be in touch soon, the good kind of soon. Claire steps outside into the afternoon sun, phone buzzing with a message from her sister asking if she is okay. She replies that she is better than okay. She is clear. That evening, Ethan attends a charity reception he has postponed twice. The room hums with polite laughter and polished intentions. Vanessa Cole stays close, her hand occasionally brushing his sleeve as if to anchor him. She tells a story about leverage and timing, about knowing when people fold. Ethan smiles, but his attention drifts to the edge of the room where an assistant struggles with a clipboard, overwhelmed. Instinctively, he almost calls out Claire's name, then stops himself, the realization landing with a dull ache. He leaves early, the city air cool against his face, and walks farther than usual before calling for a car. That night, alone in his apartment overlooking the river, Ethan opens a file he has not touched in years, a personal note he once wrote after his first major failure. It reads, "Do not confuse authority with value." He stares at the sentence and understands how easily he did exactly that. The next morning, he asks legal for a full review of the employment clause he weaponized so casually. It is airtight. He could protect himself. The thought brings no comfort. Meanwhile, Claire receives an email with an offer attached. The role is operations lead, salary competitive, equity modest, but meaningful. She reads it twice, then once more, not searching for traps, just feeling the steadiness of being wanted for what she brings, not what she tolerates. She accepts. Later that day, Ethan stands in his office and drafts an email he deletes 3 times. Apologies sound thin when written by someone used to being obeyed. Explanations feel like excuses. He closes the laptop and chooses a different route. He asks for the address of the startup hosting an open house that evening, the one he knows because Claire mentioned it once in passing, months ago, when he was only half listening. As the sun sets, 2 paths begin to arc toward the same place, not by accident, but by choice. And for the first time since the boardroom went silent, Ethan Walker understands that control is not reclaimed by command, but by accountability. Ethan arrives at the open house just after 7, the building modest, the lobby buzzing with a different rhythm than his tower, less polished, more alive. He almost turns back, instinct tugging him toward the safety of glass and height, but he steps forward instead, hands empty, no entourage, no prepared speech. Inside, the room is warm, conversations overlapping, a whiteboard filled with arrows and possibilities. He scans faces until he sees her, Claire standing near a table with brochures, laughing softly as she explains a process to 2 engineers. The sound lands differently than any boardroom applause ever has. He waits, watching the ease with which she listens, the way people lean in because she makes space, not because she demands it. When their eyes meet, there is a flicker of surprise, nothing more. No anger, no triumph, just recognition. Claire finishes her sentence, excuses herself, and walks toward him with steady steps. Ethan feels the urge to speak first, to control the moment, and resists it. He lets the silence stand. "You did not have to come," Claire says, not unkindly, not welcoming either. "I know," Ethan replies, and it is the most honest thing he has said all week. Around them, the room hums. He tells her he is here to listen, not to negotiate. She nods once, as if checking the claim against her own instincts. They step aside near a window that looks out onto a fire escape and a slice of city sky. Ethan notices details he never did before, the scuffed floor, the taped signs, the coffee station that someone refilled without being asked. He realizes how much of his life has been curated to prevent unpredictability. Claire asks what he wants. The question is simple, devastating. He answers carefully. "I want to understand why I thought it was acceptable to test you, and why I assumed you would stay." The words feel heavy, but they do not collapse. Claire considers him, not searching for contrition, but for truth. She tells him she left because staying would have taught him the wrong lesson. She did not want to win an argument. She wanted to keep herself intact. Ethan nods, the admission settling in his bones. He says he is sorry without adding reasons, without mentioning stress or responsibility. The apology stands alone. Claire accepts it without ceremony, because acceptance does not mean erasure. A founder approaches, thanks Claire for her help earlier, introduces Ethan politely, unaware of the history. Ethan shakes hands, introduces himself by name only, no title, and listens as the founder talks about scaling without losing culture. It is a problem Ethan knows intimately and has failed to solve. He listens anyway. As the evening winds down, Claire tells Ethan she accepted the offer. He smiles, surprised by the genuine lift of relief he feels, untainted by possession. Good, he says, and means it. They walk toward the door together, not as colleagues, not as something defined, just two people who share a complicated truth. Outside, the night air cools the city. Ethan asks if he can make something right without asking her to give anything back. Claire says maybe, someday, if the action comes before the promise. They part with a nod, no embrace, no vow. Ethan watches her disappear into the crowd and understands that the panic he felt when she walked away was not about losing efficiency. It was about confronting a version of himself he could no longer defend. He heads home on foot, the long way, rehearsing not speeches, but choices, knowing the next one will cost him comfort and earn him something sturdier. And across town, Claire locks the office behind her, keys new in her hand, feeling the quiet satisfaction of having walked away and found ground that did not move beneath her. The following week unfolds with a different tempo, quieter on the surface, heavier underneath. Ethan Walker returns to his office with a plan that is not written down. He schedules fewer meetings and spends more time listening, not because a consultant advised it, but because he understands how little he heard before. In a leadership review, he interrupts a familiar pattern and asks his team to challenge him without consequence. The room hesitates, then breathes. A senior manager mentions bottlenecks Claire once flagged and solved. Ethan thanks him and takes notes himself. The shift is small, almost invisible, but it begins to ripple. He meets with legal and human resources and revises language he once used as leverage, replacing ambiguity with clarity, power with accountability. Vanessa Cole notices the change and presses him in private, asking why he is making the company softer. Ethan answers evenly that he is making it sturdier. She smiles thinly and changes the subject. Across town, Claire Bennett steps into her new role and builds systems that reward transparency. She sets weekly check-ins that end on time and creates a shared document where decisions live in daylight. The team responds quickly, not out of fear, but relief. On Thursday, a logistics issue threatens a delivery window, and Claire resolves it without raising her voice, mapping options, choosing one, owning the outcome. When the fix works, the room exhales, and someone says they have not felt this calm in months. Claire smiles, feeling the unfamiliar comfort of momentum without exhaustion. That evening, Ethan receives a report from a client who mentions Claire by name, praising her professionalism and clarity. Ethan reads it twice, then closes the file, the compliment landing without sting. He drafts a message he does not send, not yet. He waits, honoring the boundary she named. On Friday, a public forum brings both companies into the same space, a panel on sustainable growth. Ethan arrives early and sits in the audience instead of the front row. Claire speaks later, concise and grounded, crediting her team and outlining principles that mirror the ones Ethan is trying to live by. When applause comes, it is clean and earned. After the panel, they cross paths near the exit. Their exchange is simple, a nod, a brief smile. Ethan tells her the work she is doing matters. Claire thanks him without inviting more. Days pass. Choices accumulate. Ethan declines a shortcut that would boost numbers and burn people. Claire hires someone who asks good questions. The city moves, indifferent, as lives recalibrate. One night, rain slicks the streets, and Ethan walks instead of taking a car, thinking about the cost of words spoken carelessly and the price of silence chosen deliberately. He sends a message at last, not asking for time, not asking for return, simply acknowledging the impact she had and the change it forced. Claire reads it on a crowded train, holds the phone, and feels no urgency to respond. She does not need to prove anything now. She looks around at strangers headed home and understands that walking away was not an end, but a beginning she did not know she was allowed to claim. In two different buildings, under the same city sky, they continue forward, not aligned yet, but honest, learning that respect does not arrive with apologies alone, but with consistent action that asks nothing in return. The pressure returns without warning, as it always does, this time in the form of a quarterly review that threatens to undo weeks of quiet repair. A rumor circulates that Walker Dynamics plans a restructuring, and investors demand reassurance. Ethan Walker stands before the board with numbers that are honest but not flattering, and for the first time, he does not soften them. He explains the changes he has made, the costs he has accepted, and the long view he is choosing. The room is restless. Vanessa Cole raises an eyebrow and asks whether idealism has replaced discipline. Ethan answers calmly that discipline without dignity is fragile, and the silence that follows is not approval, but consideration. Later that day, news breaks of a potential partnership between Walker Dynamics and a cluster of startups, including the one where Claire Bennett now leads operations. The connection is logical, strategic, and risky. Ethan insists on a transparent process, recusing himself from any appearance of favoritism. The decision moves to an independent committee. Across town, Claire hears the news secondhand and feels the familiar pull of complexity. She gathers her team and addresses it plainly, outlining conflict of interest protocols, documenting boundaries, protecting everyone involved. The team nods, grateful for clarity. That evening, a public roundtable convenes to discuss the proposed partnership. Cameras are present. Questions are sharp. Claire speaks first for her company, concise and composed, laying out metrics and safeguards. When Ethan takes the microphone, he acknowledges their past professional overlap without embellishment, states the steps taken to ensure fairness, and invites scrutiny. It is not a performance. It is an offer. The audience leans in. Afterward, in a hallway lit too brightly, they cross paths again. This time, Claire initiates the pause. She tells him she appreciated the recusal, the choice to step back rather than pull strings. Ethan nods and says it cost him leverage, and that was the point. They walk together toward the exit, conversation measured, respectful. Outside, the night is cool, traffic steady. Claire asks him why he is doing this when it would be easier to return to old habits. Ethan answers without flourish that ease is not the same as right, and he is tired of confusing the two. The words land, not as a plea, but as a statement of direction. Days pass as the committee reviews documents, interviews teams, and tests assumptions. Claire focuses on her work, refusing to speculate. Ethan waits without interference, learning the discipline of restraint. When the decision arrives, it is conditional approval, with stringent oversight and shared accountability. Both companies accept. At the signing, there are no speeches beyond the necessary. Hands shake. Pens move. The work begins. In the weeks that follow, collaboration reveals friction and possibility in equal measure. Claire and Ethan interact through structured channels. Their exchange is precise, professional. Yet beneath the process, a current flows, built on the recognition that something changed when one person walked away and another chose to learn. One evening, after a long planning session, they stand by a window overlooking the river, discussing a bottleneck that needs solving. The conversation drifts briefly to books, then back to work. There is no rush, no assumption. As they part, Ethan thanks Claire for holding the line when it mattered. Claire replies that holding the line is easier when someone finally respects it. They leave separately, the city absorbing their steps, both aware that trust rebuilt in daylight carries a weight that quiet words alone never could, and that the real test is not whether control can be reclaimed, but whether partnership can be earned. The strain finally surfaces on a Monday that begins with rain and ends with a question no spreadsheet can answer. A senior editor publishes a column implying that Walker Dynamics is performing ethical theater while protecting power behind closed doors. The piece does not name Claire, but it hints at proximity, at influence disguised as reform. Phones light up. Messages stack. Ethan Walker reads the article once, then again, noting what it gets wrong and what it exposes. He convenes a brief internal meeting and refuses to issue a defensive statement. Instead, he releases documents, timelines, and minutes, inviting verification. The move costs him goodwill with a faction that prefers silence to scrutiny. Across town, Claire Bennett reads the same column on a commuter train and feels a familiar tightening. She gathers her team and addresses the implication head-on, outlining how transparency is practiced daily, not performed publicly. She answers questions without hedging, even the uncomfortable ones, and earns trust the slow way. That afternoon, the partnership hits its first real wall when a shared vendor misses a deadline, threatening a launch window. The room fills with tension. Claire proposes a fix that requires Walker Dynamics to absorb a short-term cost. Ethan approves it without hesitation. The decision ripples outward, surprising people who expected a tug-of-war. Later, in a quiet conference room, Claire asks Ethan directly whether he is prepared for what reform actually demands when applause fades. Ethan answers that he already paid the easiest price and is prepared for the harder ones. The conversation pauses, balanced on honesty. That evening, they attend a community forum together, seated apart, answering questions from students and small business owners. A young founder asks how to know when to walk away from a powerful opportunity. Claire answers first, saying you walk away when the cost is your voice. Ethan follows, saying you learn to listen when someone has the courage to do that. The audience is quiet, attentive. After the forum, the rain has stopped, and the streetlights reflect off the pavement. They walk a block together, conversation unguarded but careful. Claire admits that trust rebuilt under pressure feels different than trust given freely. Ethan agrees and adds that it feels heavier because it is earned. The next morning brings news that the vendor issue has been resolved and the launch salvaged. Credit flows to the team, not the executives. Claire sends a brief note thanking the operations staff. Ethan forwards it unchanged. Days later, the committee announces a public audit of the partnership to set a precedent. Ethan endorses it. Vanessa Cole warns him privately that he is giving away too much control. Ethan replies that control was never the asset he thought it was. The audit proceeds, findings published, imperfections acknowledged. The market reacts cautiously, then stabilizes. In the calm that follows, Ethan and Claire meet to review outcomes. The room is plain. The work is clear. Claire states what worked and what did not. Ethan listens and accepts the critique without rebuttal. As they pack up, Claire pauses and says she notices the consistency, not the gestures. Ethan nods, relieved by the specificity. They part with a mutual understanding that the hardest test was never public opinion, but whether change would hold when it was inconvenient. In choosing transparency over comfort, restraint over impulse, and partnership over control, they discover that the distance once created by a single sentence has narrowed not by apology, but by alignment, and the path forward, while still uncertain, is finally shared without assumption. The turning point arrives quietly, without ceremony, during a late afternoon review that stretches longer than planned. The audit results are finalized, the partnership stabilized, and the room exhales with the relief of work done right. As people file out, Claire Bennett remains to gather her notes. Ethan Walker lingers too, not out of strategy, but intention. He waits until the door closes, then speaks with a steadiness that surprises him. He says he is not here to ask her to return, not to reclaim what he lost, but to acknowledge what she built when she chose herself. He slides a folder across the table, not a contract, but a proposal drafted by the independent committee, outlining a joint initiative focused on governance standards, co-led, equal authority, transparent metrics, and a public charter that binds decisions to principles rather than personalities. Claire reads carefully, eyes moving line by line, noting the absence of escape clauses, the inclusion of shared accountability. She looks up and asks why he is offering this now. Ethan answers that timing no longer serves him the way it used to, and that if he believes in partnership, he has to risk being refused. Claire considers the weight of that risk and what it signals. She asks one more question, not about money or title, but about what happens when the initiative challenges his own power again. Ethan answers without pause that he will step aside if required, and that this time, he will not frame restraint as loss. The words hang, unadorned. Claire closes the folder and says she will think about it, because choice matters most when it is not rushed. Days pass. The city turns colder. Work continues. Ethan does not follow up. He lets the proposal stand on its merits. Claire consults her team, mentors, and her sister, weighing not opportunity, but alignment. She imagines the work done well and the cost of compromise. On a crisp morning, she requests a meeting. They sit across from each other in a neutral room, with a clock that ticks audibly. Claire says yes, but with conditions written in plain language, including a review clause that allows her to walk away without penalty if the charter is violated. Ethan agrees and adds one more condition of his own, that leadership credit be shared publicly, even when it is inconvenient. The agreement is signed. The announcement follows, measured and clear, focusing on outcomes, not redemption arcs. The response is cautious, then curious. Teams begin to collaborate under the new framework, debates sharpen, decisions slow and improve. One evening, after a long session refining standards, Ethan and Claire walk out together. The street is quiet. He thanks her for trusting the process. She replies that trust was not granted, it was verified. He nods, accepting the distinction. They stop at a corner, the light changing. Ethan asks if he may take her to dinner sometime, not as a colleague, not as a condition, but as a question offered freely. Claire considers the ask, the weeks of consistency behind it, the space he left when she needed it. She says yes, with the understanding that no choice made tonight binds tomorrow. Ethan smiles, relieved by the clarity. They part with an ease that feels earned. In choosing action over apology and structure over promises, they discover a different kind of closeness, one built not on control or dependence, but on mutual respect that can withstand daylight, disagreement, and time. And for the first time since a single sentence changed everything, the future opens not as a demand, but as an invitation. Months later, the work settles into rhythm and meaning, the kind that endures after headlines fade. The joint initiative publishes its first annual report, plain language, measurable outcomes, imperfections named without apology. Independent reviewers commend the structure and note the unusual balance of authority. Inside Walker Dynamics, the culture shifts from guarded to grounded. Meetings begin with context, end with ownership. At the startup, systems scale without losing care. Claire Bennett leads with steadiness, her calendar full but humane, her team confident in daylight decisions. Ethan Walker learns a new muscle, patience, and finds it stronger than urgency ever was. Their dinners remain simple, chosen for conversation rather than display. They talk about books and work, about boundaries and weekends, about what they are building separately and together. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is assumed. On a clear evening, they attend a small gathering celebrating a milestone for the initiative, not a gala, just a room with people who did the work. Speeches are brief. Credit is shared. Ethan watches Claire speak with clarity and warmth, and recognizes a truth that no metric can capture, that respect multiplies when it is practiced consistently. Later, as the room empties, he thanks her for choosing partnership without surrender. She thanks him for learning restraint without resentment. They walk outside, the city calm, the river reflecting light like a steady line forward. Weeks pass. Decisions test the charter again, and again it holds. When a proposal conflicts with principles, Ethan votes against his own short-term interest. The record notes it. The teams notice. Trust deepens not through promises, but through proof. One Saturday morning, they meet at a quiet cafe near the park, the same one where Claire once planned next steps with a box on her lap. They sit by the window. Ethan says he has learned the difference between being needed and being chosen, and that he values the latter because it can be withdrawn without punishment. Claire listens and replies that walking away taught her what staying should feel like. He reaches into his coat and places a small envelope on the table. Not a ring, not a demand, just a note he wrote and rewrote, offering a future that preserves choice and honors independence. Claire reads it slowly, smiles, and keeps it, saying yes to the path, not the possession. They agree to continue as they are, partners in work and life, accountable and free. Time moves. Seasons change. The initiative expands to mentor other companies. The story people once whispered loses its edge and becomes an example. In a boardroom that no longer feels like a battleground, Ethan speaks a sentence he once used carelessly and reframes it publicly, saying everyone is free to leave, and everyone is invited to stay. The room understands the difference now. At dusk, Claire stands by the window of her office, city lights rising, and thinks of the day she chose herself. Ethan joins her, quiet, present. They share a look that carries history without weight. In choosing action over control, respect over leverage, and partnership over fear, they build something that did not exist before, a future grounded in consent and courage, where walking away was the beginning of coming back by choice, and where love, like leadership, proves itself not by command, but by care.